So we're at the top of the hour, or top of the half hour, if you will. And let's get started because I know we have a lot to go over, and I'm sure everybody is anxious to get into it. Let me do a quick introduction. I'm Keith Matson. I'm the facilitator for tonight's meeting. You're actually not going to hear very much from me. You're going to hear from people who are smarter than me, have more interesting information to tell. But I'm kicking off this meeting, just kind of getting us oriented. So I want to welcome you to this first community meeting. And, it's almost passé to say this is unique to do a meeting like this on a platform like Zoom, because everybody's been doing this for the past year. So I think we're all getting to be veterans on this one, but hopefully we'll be able to make this platform work well for you as participants, and to be able to not just convey the information to you that we'd like to, but to get your insight. What I think all of us have learned is that these kinds of virtual meetings, if you use them right, can be a great way to consolidate a lot of information from a lot of different people very efficiently. It's just not the same as being in the big room. But we'll try to make it as sort of cozy and user-friendly as possible. So I did want to just point out one thing, that this meeting is being recorded. And that's just so we can keep a record of, all the proceedings, but you're not going to be quoted individually on anything, so don't worry about that. Let's go to the next slide if we could. And I want to make a few introductions very quickly. We have some members of the city's Department of Planning and Permitting. And I want to just ask Dina Wong, who's the division chief for the planning division, to quickly, say a few welcoming remarks before we get into the rest of the agenda. Dina?
Okay, sure. Just want to welcome everyone to our first community vision meeting. This is the first update we're doing purely on a remote platform. And as Keith was saying, I think a lot of folks have gotten used to it. So hopefully we'll still be able to get the kind of input that we need. The consultant team will go over, the history and the previous plan. So we're updating the 2011 North Shore Sustainable Communities Plan, and it's mandated by charter to be updated every 5 years. So here we are today, and there's a lot of new issues facing the community, and we hope to be able to tackle them and come up with policies and implementing actions that can get us towards the kind of future that we envision for the future generation. So from our department, unfortunately, our project manager, Raymond Young, wasn't able to be here today, but we have Brandon Sue, who's the assistant project manager, and Franz Krantz, who's a planner in the branch that's managing this contract. So welcome everyone, and we really appreciate everyone taking the time during this dinner hour. I guess everybody has to either eat early or a little bit late, so we really thank you.
Okay. Or actually, don't feel ashamed to just nibble on something while the meeting is going on. I'm sure some of you need to do that. Thank you for also introducing your colleagues, Dina. I want to quickly introduce the consultant team, who you're going to see give different parts of the presentation. But we have with us Jared Chang, who's a principal in charge for SSFM of this project, Melissa May, who's the project manager and the planner, and then also 3 planners, Malachi Krishak, Matt Fernandez, and Abby Seitz, who are all online as well today. They've been putting a lot of work into this, and I hope we can profit from their hard research that's been going into this project. Let's get to the next slide, please. So you're probably all familiar with Zoom's ability to let you chat on the side if you want. While we don't encourage like a lot of back and forth unless you have questions, feel free to, at this point, as we're going through some of this preliminary stuff, to just throw in your name, what neighborhood you're from. It's not mandatory, but if you would like to do that, that gives us everybody else a sense of who's online, because it's hard to see everybody on the screen at once, obviously. So in addition to that, in a little bit, we're going to be having another way you can introduce yourselves to each other. Okay, next slide, please. Here's what we want to cover tonight. We have a couple of hours, and we've already done the introductions. I'm just going to go over a couple of very basic things, ground rules, essentially, but also some information about both Zoom and the Mentimeter application that we'll use for instant polling. This is one of the great features of doing these kinds of online meetings is, you have the ability to capture the reactions of people and show them graphically very, very quickly. It's a nice tool to use. Then we're going to get into the essence of the meeting, the content, presentations and discussions. Melissa's going to do a project overview. Then we're going to get into policy issues and priorities for the SCP update. Then later on, we're going to be covering where we're going with the vision for 2045. The 2011 plan had its comprehensive vision, and that's a starting point, but we're going to kind of take that as just a starting point, examine that, pull that apart a little bit, and then try to build for the new update as to what you want to have included in the vision. And we'll wrap up at the end with what we're doing next. There's a lot of activity planned over the next year, and a lot of different ways for the community to be involved in this process. Okay, next slide, please. This is kind of intuitive, what we want to get out of this meeting. We've already introduced ourselves, but we want you to understand this project. We want you to understand what really a long-range plan is about, if you don't know already. Some of you have been instrumental in this kind of stuff for a long time, so I'm sure you know it. And we really do need to hear your thoughts about the North Shore vision for the next 25 years. That's a long period of time. That's 2045 already. And so there's a lot that can be brought into that type of discussion when you're thinking 25 years out. And I look forward to hearing what your thoughts are. We also want to share information on the project and how that you can provide input throughout this planning process that's going to be going on for the next year. Okay, next slide, please. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on these ground rules because I think everybody's pretty familiar with them. But just to make things easier on everybody, if you haven't done so already, do take a chance to enter your first and last name on the screen name that you see. Most of you, I can see that already, but that's very helpful. Sometimes all we see is, a telephone number or a code number or whatever. We do encourage you to keep your video on when possible, just so it try to replicate as much as possible a real meeting. I see most people have their microphones muted already, which is terrific because there is a lot of background noise that does occur sometimes. So if you're not speaking, it's a good idea just to have that mic muted. We have a few different ways that you can raise your hand for attention, if you will. You can either put it in the chat. If you're familiar with using the little icon like this one, where did it go? That I'm putting up there. You can see my hand raised. Go ahead and do that. That's another way. And then the third way is the old fail-safe, just put your hand up. We'll do our best to scan the room and see if somebody has something that they need to say at a specific point. But we have right now 64 people in the meeting, so that's a lot of folks to look at. So please be patient with us on that. And if you do speak, we do ask that you try to be brief, succinct, and on topic with any comments or questions you have. Always, show your aloha for everybody. Everybody's got their own individual view, and they're all valid. And one other thing is, is to use the chat feature judiciously. I think some people sometimes try to keep a running dialogue, and that can help sometimes, but other times it can be distracting. So put really meaningful things in there when you want to, but try to avoid like just a sidebar conversation that will just flood the chat room. Okay, so I think that's all we need to go through. Let's go to the next slide, please. If you're not familiar with the Zoom, these are the features you're most interested in. The mute button on the right, far left side, and then your chat feature over here that I'm circling. And then this is your way you can raise your hand. That's really about all you need on Zoom. It's such an easy platform to use. Next slide, please. If you're not familiar with using Mentimeter or a similar type of application, it's extremely easy and user-friendly. So you just take your phone and you, if you haven't already downloaded that Mentimeter app, you can get that downloaded for free. And the important thing is you're going to be you're going to be asked for a 6-digit code, and that code right there, 619392, is what you'll punch in for all the questions we're going to be asking you tonight. So you can take a minute to do that now if you'd like. We'll keep that code up whenever we ask a Mentimeter question, and we will be doing that fairly shortly. Okay, next slide, please. So here's the first one. This is a chance to just test drive Mentimeter if you haven't done it already. And so if you go to that app and type in that same code, you're going to see some questions. And you can go through the questions at your own pace. We'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that, but they're basically just to give us a sense of who's in the room. Now, we're only going to display the answers for what neighborhood people are from. And so you'll see a few different neighborhoods and bars going up as to how many are from each one. And then we're going to do something creative with the whatever planning concern you identify. We're not going to display any of the demographic questions, though. Those are just for us to get a sense of how broadly based the composition is. So go ahead, take a minute to do that, and we'll circle back in just 2 minutes. So this is nice. Down in the lower right-hand corner, you can see the number of people who have voted already. Okay. Okay. We're getting more in there. So I think on the previous slide, we saw that we have quite a lot from the Pupukea area in the room, right? This is nice. So this is dynamic. You can see the biggest concerns emerging as more people vote. Good. Okay. So we got 24. It seems to be stuck on that number now, which is great. That's about a typical turnout for most elections these days. So this is good. You can see right there, right in the center, tourism and tourism overload. You can always put those two together, probably. seem to be jumping out at everybody, but also agriculture and infrastructure seem to be high on everybody's list as well. Infrastructure might be code for traffic congestion, because I don't see traffic congestion listed only in a small sidebar. Housing is also a fairly big concern. So, these are obviously all going to be part of the plan, and we'll be talking about them in more detail later. So let's shift out of this now and get back to the main slide there. Okay, so this is the last part of the introduction, if you will. Normally when you go to a big open house like this one, before the meeting, you're going to see somebody either you know really well, somebody you haven't seen for a while, or you might just be lucky and get a chance to meet somebody you've never seen before. Have a nice little conversation before the meeting starts. Because we don't have that luxury in the same way with an online environment, we're going to try to replicate that as much as possible by putting you randomly in small breakout rooms for just like 3 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up a whole bunch of breakout rooms. You're going to be randomly assigned, and we want you to you're going to have either 3 or 4 people in the room with you. Just tell everybody your name and just say a little bit about what brought you to this meeting today. What was your big driving issue or concern or interest? It's just a chance to get to know a few people online in the same meeting. So let's go ahead and start that process now. Just to give you a heads up though, if you're not familiar with these breakout group meetings, there's not much you have to do, but you're going to see initially this thing saying that so-and-so is inviting you to join a breakout room. Just push join. That's all you need to do. Everything else is going to be automatic. When it's time to come back into the main room, it'll come in automatically. You can leave it early, but it'll just time out and you'll be back in the main room again. So let's go ahead and populate those breakout rooms. So I'm going to assume everybody's back. Nobody got lost in cyberspace with that that little exercise. But again, it would be great if we were all in the same place, and this is a little more easy to do. But we hope that at least gave you a little bit of sense of familiarity with some of the other people who are in this meeting with you. Now we're going to pivot and get into the content. So to start us off with that, Melissa May is going to run over the project overview. And I'll just turn it over to her at this point.
Thanks, Keith, and aloha, everybody. It's really great to see such a wonderful turnout. As Keith introduced me before, I'm Melissa May with SSFM. I'm the project manager for this project, helping out DPP on the update. And I'm a planner based in Honolulu, and I've done work in communities all over the state, but the North Shore is really close to my heart. I spend a lot of time up there and know a lot of people in the community already, and so I'm just really excited about the opportunity to be involved in this and to help facilitate this community vision and policies. So I've really enjoyed making the rounds over the last few months and getting to know some more people in the community. And I'm just going to give an overview of this process so that you all are familiar with what we're going to be doing over the next 18 months or so. Next slide, please. So for those of you that are new to the Sustainable Communities Plans, the North Shore Sustainable Communities Plan is one of the city's I think there's 8, correct me if I'm wrong, Franz, but there's a set of development plans and sustainable communities plans for each section of the island. And this one covers the North Shore Planning District, which I'll show on a map in a moment. But the general plan you can see on this graphic is the overarching plan for the whole island and for the city and county, and the development and sustainable communities plans set the policies for the districts. And the way that the city uses it is basically as a guide when they're reviewing discretionary permits and implementing land use decisions and infrastructure investments. So it's a really important touch point for city decision making. And what it accomplishes is to set forward the vision, policies, guidelines, and actions for the North Shore region for the next 25 years and beyond. So the horizon for this plan is 2045. And then the way that it gets implemented is through regulations like zoning, land use permits, the land use ordinance, as well as special area plans and infrastructure plans. So it really kind of sets the tone for these other plans to follow, and then ultimately for the budgeting for CIP projects. Next slide, please. So here's the North Shore Planning District. As you can see, it goes all the way from Kaena Point to just past Sunset. And then it goes inland, including parts of Helemano and the Mokuleia Forest Reserve. And you can see these 5 neighborhood sub-areas that are recognized: Mokuleia, Wailua, Haleiwa, Kawailoa, and Sunset Pupukea. Next slide, please. So the North Shore Update addresses a wide range of policy topics that are of interest to the community. Many of them are listed here, and this update process is going to take a close look at all of these, and they're going to look at what policies already exist in the last plan, which was updated in 2011, what's changed and what needs updating. And of course, because this is a city plan, a lot of what it can do is focused on things within the city's jurisdiction. However, there are policies and guidelines that can take a position on things outside the city's jurisdiction as well, because we recognize that there are many things in the community that are important that cross jurisdictional boundaries. Next slide, please. So the current North Shore SCP, and I definitely encourage you to take a look at it if you haven't already. It's a great plan, and it was updated in 2011, and it's a really articulate, well-informed plan that I understand the community was heavily involved in, and it has 5 chapters. The first is North Shore's role in Oahu's development pattern. Then there's the vision for the North Shore's future, land use policies and guidelines, public facilities and infrastructure policies and guidelines, and implementation. And then next slide, please. Under those policy chapters, there's all of these other topics. So it's pretty comprehensive, and it includes policies and guidelines, which are intended as more to direct priorities and implementation for the city. Next slide, please. There are also 3 maps that are pretty key to the current plan. There's a map for land use, one for open space and public facilities. And these are intended to be graphical representations of the policies in the plan. So it's really intending to show what the community's intent is with regard to land use. And you can see here the land use map. There's a community growth boundary shown by a black dotted line. And that basically is intended to delineate areas where the community is generally wanting to concentrate any future development that occurs and prohibit development outside. So part of our task in this update is to look at that and ask, does this need to be updated and how? So this next slide shows what we're hoping to accomplish with the plan update. So really our task is to review and update the current North Shore SCP. And as part of that, we will be assessing progress toward the vision, policies, principles, and guidelines in the 2011 plan, and what's happened, how are we doing, what hasn't happened. Identifying policy issues and trends to address in the plan update, including looking at any current or future development proposals that are known at this time, any emerging issues that the last plan didn't address. We'll also be updating the plan vision, working with the community, if needed, to reflect community desires and aspirations and make sure that everyone's still on the same page about where you want to be in the next 25 years. We'll identify revisions needed to policies and maps to achieve the vision and address implementation needs. And we'll also be identifying performance measures as a way to keep track of how the plan is being implemented. Next slide, please. So this is just a little overview of how we can get from the beginning to a final product. And we start with looking at what already exists, the 2011 SCP. And we use input from the community, from agencies, as well as our own project team's research and data collection. as well as data from DPP and the census. And we gather the community input using the different events that we're going to be hosting, such as workshops. We go into the neighborhood board, online open houses, and surveys. So ultimately, all of that goes into the hopper, and we come out with draft vision, policies, and performance measures. And it's not that it's all going to come out at once for everyone to react to. There will be things along the way for people to see and react to, but that will be the ultimate result. And then that will get folded into a public review draft. There'll be a comment period. We'll incorporate comments, and then ultimately goes to the Planning Commission for review and City Council for adoption. And then from there, it gets implemented in all those ways that I explained in the previous slides. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to share with you folks that, you know, from our side as the project team, we are committed to best practices and to planning principles for this process. And those include being inclusive, making efforts to include diverse perspectives and underrepresented groups, to be transparent in assessing where we are, how we got here, lessons learned and changes needed with your help, using community-informed and research-based policy to make decisions, and be collaborative in our effort to evaluate progress and create policy solutions, to be forward-thinking in the face of uncertainties and threats, of which there are plenty, and honoring and celebrating the North Shore's unique identity and sense of place. And then, of course, to be implementation focused as much as we can so that this is a plan that can be acted upon. Next slide. So to help us in this process, one of the avenues for community engagement we've established, and that has been common to previous updates, is a planning advisory committee composed of citizens that represent different neighborhoods, perspectives, demographics, and organizations that are active in the community. And I know this is small, maybe hard for you, some of you to read, but it's also on the project website. And maybe Matt, could you drop in the link to where you can find this list on the project website in the chat? That way you can take a closer look at it. But there are 34 members. There's a few that were on the 2011 Planning Advisory Committee, so we'll have some continuity. And then there's some that are on the current neighborhood board, and then just a whole range of people from schools to community organizations to active residents. And I'm really happy to see quite a few of you here tonight. So thank you for that. We anticipate meeting with them 6 times, and really their role is to help us make sure that, that we're reaching the community and that this plan is a reflection of community desires. And they're just kind of, they're going to be helping advise the planning team so that when we go out to the broader community for validation, that you all can see yourselves in it and it's not just coming from us as outside consultants. So next slide, please. So this is just a high-level view of the project schedule. It's about an 18-month schedule, which is really ambitious, and so that's why we had to put the footnote, subject to change. We are hoping to get to a public review draft early next year, and up until then, there will be 3 community workshops. We're assuming they'll all be virtual, but maybe not. Maybe we'll be able to get together in person at some point. But as you can see, we've been at the background research for a few months already, and that included about 30 stakeholder interviews to date. We have a few more to do. We also issued a mail survey that many of you hopefully received in January, and there's a public online version of that launching today. And then we've started working with the CPAC as well. So you can see that the process of developing the vision, goals, and policy is concurrent with the stakeholder outreach so that it feeds into each other. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So just a little overview of what we've done to date in terms of community engagement. Hopefully some of you have visited the project website already. We've posted the fact sheet. We've established a Facebook page, and we're also streaming live on that right now for people to participate that way. We have an email list, and we've been sending out emails to that to promote this meeting. The city has done one press release, and we've taken out some advertising in the North Shore News, so we'll keep those promotional efforts up. And we've kicked off the CPAC. We did the survey that I mentioned earlier, and we did a presentation to the North Shore Neighborhood Board, and we also paid a visit to Ko'olauloa and just announced the process as well in February. Then today is our first big community workshop. Concurrently, we have an open house that launches today, and I'll show you a little bit more about that soon. And then we're working with Wailua High School. I'm really excited to share that we have 3 Wailua High School students on the CPAC. I see you guys here today, and you know, we're looking for ways to get the youth involved in the visioning and policy development process. So we're working with them on that. Next slide, please. So upcoming opportunities for input. So today, as I mentioned, is the launch of the online open house. And I really, really hope that you guys will take the opportunity to check this out. First, because, you know, we just, with only 2 hours, we're not going to be able to cover everything in enough detail, you know, to really provide you a full overview of the issues involved in the North Shore Plan, but there's a lot more information up here that you can study on your own time and, you know, familiarize with, and just take time to absorb it and comment at your leisure. It's a similar kind of exploration as we're doing in this meeting, and there's a lot of interactive ways that you can look at the vision elements and the different kinds of policy issues. And so we're going to leave that open house up for a couple months through about May 4th. Also linked on the open house is the online survey. So this is an online version of the one that went out by mail, and we'll be collecting responses on that through March 30th. Coming up next, the next big event will be the North Shore Futures Workshop this summer. And that'll be really exciting as a way to explore the big picture issues about the North Shore future and how that affects the way that you're thinking about, you know, the next 25 years and beyond. We're hoping that eventually we can come out and get into the community and do a pop-up event, but TBD, depending on COVID. And we'll also be back to the neighborhood board. Next slide, please. So, you know, before we move on, I just wanted to give an opportunity if anyone had any particular questions about the process that I just presented. We have a couple minutes to take questions before we get into the other material.
I have a question.
Sure.
Carol.
Hi, Carol.
So with the Citizens Advisory Group meetings, are those going to be private meetings, or will that be available for like the public to watch the process going down?
The meetings are not public. However, the materials will be posted online following the meetings. And this is basically consistent with how they were done in the past, I believe. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bob has a question.
Sure. Hi, Bob.
Hi again. With regard to the survey, if we mailed it in, is there any value in taking the one online? Is it different in any way, or would that be considered, you know, duplicate effort?
If you've already taken the mail one, no need to do the online one. But, you know, we mainly put it up because the mail one only went to, you know, one survey per household. So if there's other people in your household that didn't get to fill it out, you know, maybe they would like to take the online version. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no worries. Hi, Antia, I see your hand up.
Hi, Melissa. How are you doing?
Great.
The process sounds really comprehensive and well done. But last time around, they had the final public meeting at the Surf Center, if I remember, and it was in, I think, the second week of December, when a lot of people could not attend. And I would like to make sure we're not going to have any meetings in December near Christmas time.
Yeah, okay, that's noted and agreed. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other comments, and so let's keep moving along, and I'll hand it back to Keith, or actually I think I'm handing it over to Malachi.
That's right. Malachi's up.
Malachi.
I'm up. Okay, mahalo, Melissa. Aloha kako. My name is Malachi Krishak. I'm a planner with SSFM, as Keith introduced me earlier. I'm also joined by Rebecca Ward, who is our consultant who's conducting the survey, and she'll have a short time to share a little bit more about the survey methodology and process in just a couple slides. So I hope we're on standby, Rebecca. But this next section looks at the early objectives that Melissa shared just now, which is really to update and review what's happened since the 2011 North Shore Sustainability Plan was adopted, and to see what has changed and what key issues are necessary to include in this update. We've been spending these last few months doing research, and this kind of research process included review of available information and the data from sources like the US Census Bureau, Department of Planning and Permitting. We also have been reviewing relevant plans and new policies which have been updated since the last plan. And as Melissa mentioned, we've completed, I think the exact number is 29 interviews with agencies and folks in the community related to the policy issues and policy areas that you saw earlier, and that relate to the last plan's vision elements. And then, as Melissa mentioned, we have this community survey, which we'll hear about in a few minutes. The outcomes for this process include the kind of report card with indicators to assess the progress of the 2011 plan, but also inform us for how to measure the implementation of this plan. And that's part of this process too. And we'll also have 2 white papers under development. One looking at issues and opportunities related to tourism in the North Shore, and another one by Sea Grant looking at climate change and resilience. And lastly, the project team is currently working on a series of fact sheets on key policy topics, which will be available online in the coming months on the website. So keep an eye out. I'm sure there'll be an email if you're signed up for the email list. And with that, we're going to talk quickly about the community survey. And I want to pass it off to our consultant here, Rebecca Ward, to share a bit about the community survey process.
Hello all, it's Becky Ward. The purpose is very consistent with what we've been hearing all along so far, which is to understand community sentiments around the progress toward the 2011 vision plan, to assess current issues and priorities, and to measure opinion around some potential policy solutions. So anytime we have a population that's geographically defined as well as this is, mail is the best vehicle. So we direct mailed to North Shore addresses, both residences and businesses. And you see they went out to a little over 5,800 addresses. We also provided an option for any of those recipients to complete the survey online. So there was an online option provided as well. The response really has been tremendous. As of yesterday, 1,200 plus responses for a response rate of 23%. And what that tells us as researchers and the team as planners is yet another indication of involvement and concern about the community. So that 23% is really phenomenal. And I thank you all. I learned in the breakout room that a woman said that she and her husband filled it out together and took a lot of time to provide comments. And I would underscore that, as a lot of you provided comments. So while we have responses from over 1,200, you can understand that we haven't completed final data analysis. So we will be sharing preliminary results based on the first approximately 600. And I'll tell you that the results demographically reflect the community quite well. So we're very confident about the findings and anxious for you to see them. And I will turn it back to Malachi.
Thank you, Becky. And then, as we mentioned, the same survey is on that open house right now. But if you did take it, it's the same survey, so no need. But if you did not get the chance to take it for some reason, we highly encourage you to check it out after this meeting. Okay, so just to move into some preliminary survey results from that around 600 initial responses. The first thing we're looking at here is looking at the satisfaction with efforts and progress towards the 2011 vision elements that were identified in the last plan. And here you see the responses of folks who said they're very or somewhat satisfied with efforts. And these are the top 3 vision elements of people identified, with 63% said they are satisfied with efforts to keep new development consistent with the North Shore's rural character and the surrounding open space. We see 60% of respondents indicated that they are satisfied with efforts to preserve significant historic features and native Hawaiian culture and archaeological sites. And then we have 51%, a little over half of the initial respondents said they're satisfied with efforts to protect lands and open space from development. And you might notice that this isn't like super high levels of satisfaction here. You know, even as the top 3, we're still seeing about a third of the respondents were not very satisfied with it, just to note in the initial. Here we're looking at this slide. You see the 3 vision elements receiving the lowest levels of satisfaction in the survey responses. And 28% of folks said they're not satisfied, or said they're satisfied, pardon me. 28% of respondents are satisfied with efforts to provide housing for all income levels. We're seeing only 27 are satisfied with efforts to protect coastal water quality. And then only 12% of people said that they feel satisfied with efforts and progress towards managing and lessening impacts of traffic and congestion. I think everyone who's driven on the North Shore can understand that. Next, moving into priorities. So we asked folks to also look at priorities and prioritize issues in 2 timeframes in the survey. The first time frame is the present, and that's understanding that there are probably impacts from COVID-19 that are affecting our perspective in terms of what's a priority in the near term. And we also ask people to look ahead 5 years from now, kind of assuming that COVID-19 should no longer be a threat affecting how you prioritize things in your head. And the top 5 issues that were identified were actually the same in terms of the topics for now and in 5 years, but you can see that some of the percentages are a little bit different. The top 5 here are preserving rural character and limiting growth outside of specific designated areas. Diversifying the local economy to be less dependent on tourism was the second highest. Preserving agricultural lands was the third highest priority. Increasing farming and food production. And then the other top priority was addressing climate change risks by protecting beaches and potentially moving development away from the coast. So you can see that while they're the same in the near term and in the long term, you can see the percentages here are not quite the same. We actually had about 58% of respondents select they don't know or they refuse to answer in the 5-year term. So it's kind of an interesting finding in the initial one. So it might be, you know, maybe we're unsure what 5 years is going to look like just because this last year has been kind of an anomaly and strange, or maybe those priorities haven't changed. So it's just something to note. This next slide summarizes the demographics of the survey respondents. in the initial 618 that have been analyzed. And 28% are from Sunset Pupukea area. In the top right, we're looking at the ethnicity breakdown, self-identified of the folks who responded. So 51% of the initial respondents are Caucasian, identify as Caucasian. 15% identify as mixed ethnicity or other. And then we have 10% identified as Hawaiian or part Hawaiian. And then from those initial respondents, we had 66% of the respondents indicated that they're born and raised on the North Shore or have lived there for 20 years or longer. So we have some really rooted community here, and it's great to see such high response rate. We also, the survey also went into two specific topics, tourism and climate change, and I wanted to collect community opinion on potential policies in these areas. So here we're seeing the top 5 measures that respondents supported related to tourism and tourism issues in the North Shore community. The top one you see here is limiting hours of commercial tour uses of beaches and beach parks. We see interest in stronger enforcement against illegal and whole home vacation rentals. There's also support for developing a visitor shuttle to kind of relieve traffic in the area, either from Haleiwa or from Kahuku, leaving from Haleiwa or Kahuku. And then at the bottom here, we see that there was some level of support for allowing new legal bed and breakfasts or even a single small inn or hotel in Haleiwa town. And overall, 67% of the respondents strongly or somewhat agree that there is a need to diversify the North Shore economy to be less dependent on tourism. And the other topic area we asked about was climate change. And here you can see that overall, there's a higher levels of kind of unified support in potential policy measures related to climate change. 84% of the respondents are very or somewhat concerned about the impacts to the resources on the shoreline caused by hardening or erosion of the coastline. And the top 5 issues that people are, top 5 solutions that people were interested in and supported, the top was natural solutions for protecting the beaches. People also support incentives for green infrastructure, for instance, like water catchment. People would be interested in zero tolerance policies for unpermitted seawalls or hardening, and retreat of infrastructure and even private homes from the coast. And then one that's not shown here, but also received high levels of support, was support for more solar farms in the region, but away from neighborhoods. So along with the survey, as Melissa mentioned, we're developing a kind of report card that is in development with the objective of identifying measurable and repeatable indicators which can be used to assess current progress towards the plan vision and also be used moving forward with this plan as we develop our policies and vision. In the last plan update, a performance assessment was completed rather than actual measurable report card. And during that process, a number of possible indicators were identified by the planning consultant, but they weren't researched or really looked at closer than that. So kind of to help move the needle forward, the planning team here has taken those and is working to develop a draft scorecard that includes quantifiable indicators from available data to help inform the plan. Sometimes it's challenging to find available data that's consistent. So the process is underway. We're looking to find relevant and verifiable findings which can be incorporated into this initial research with fact sheets and white papers, but also in the policy development. So I just wanted to share some examples of what that might look like using kind of measurable information to assess progress towards goals. You can see here we have land use and responsible development. You can use it, the city's information from new development for new buildings since 2010. And you can kind of look at this and say, okay, have we kept the rural character? Have we kept it low rise? And you can see here that 25% is 1 story, 65% is 2 stories, so it's been kept pretty low rise. We can also use geographic information systems, GIS, to measure the percentage of land zoned agriculture in the city's land use ordinance as a measure of whether we're keeping lands in agriculture. And you can see that approximately 55% of the total area is zoned for Ag 1 or Ag 2 in the LUO. You can also here you can also use state statistics and information that's being gathered, like brown water advisories from the Department of Health, to measure things like the nearshore water quality, which we saw as an issue. There was 110 brown water advisories since 2011, so about 11 a year, and it seems like that those might be increasing recently, which makes sense given the feedback we've heard recently. And then lastly, we can use census data and American Community Survey 5-year estimates, which are samples to measure changes in things like population or housing. So here you can see that since 2010, the population has actually remained somewhat consistent at around 17,700, 18,000 range. And home ownership has also remained around 49%. And with the American Community Survey, we use a margin of error. So here you see the margin of error is about 5%. So you have to take that with kind of maybe a grain of salt there. But rental vacancy has also remained really low, consistently low at about 1%. Okay. So all this information that I just shared really quickly, the background research process, we mentioned we conducted the interviews, we talked about the community survey, we talked about this measurable report card. The planning team has worked to compile kind of an initial list of key policy issues for each of the vision elements, along with some ideas of how the plan is able to address them. And a lot more information is available for everyone to peruse and provide input on in the open house. I'll share that in a minute, but I do want to share a summary of some of the big issues, but this is definitely not all of them. So land use and rural responsible development, we've heard a lot about, an important goal is maintaining rural character, whether it's community growth boundary design guidelines. We've heard concerns about regulation and enforcement of the planned goals, especially related to food trucks, CPRs on agricultural land, community property regimes on agricultural land, short-term rentals again, and issues with affordable housing. Agriculture policy issues, we've seen preserving ag land, enhancing agriculture as part of the economy. We know there's issues with irrigation and the water systems and water quality. And tourism, diversifying the economy to be less dependent on tourism. Again, we've heard that a few times. Managing the impacts, again, short-term rentals. Transportation issues, we know about the traffic congestion, everyone does. We also know issues of access and walkability, especially in the Haleiwa town and Waialua, walkways and parking. And also more transportation options, alternatives away from cars. And then infrastructure problems that have come up, we've heard thus far, cesspool, wastewater treatment. That relates to water quality, but we saw the brown water advisories with the nearshore water quality. Coastal erosion caused by climate change. And then just the general capacity of infrastructure for the existing resident population, and it seems to be the growing visitor population in the region. So as I mentioned on the open house, there's a lot more information. So what you're seeing here is kind of a larger, more detailed breakdown of some of the key issues that we've collected thus far. But we want to hear what you think in terms of whether you agree with them, if we're missing anything, And the same thing for how the plan can address it. We really want to hear your ideas. And, you know, in these large community meetings, we have over 60 people here. It's hard to get everyone's thoughts. So we do have this online open house, which you can visit the NorthstarSCP.com, and then you'll see a link to the online open house. And there's a section, if you scroll down, where you can click on the different policy areas, and it will take you to the slide that I just showed here. And you have a breakdown of this, and you'll have an opportunity to fill out a form that looks like this here, where you can say whether or not you agree and share all your comments related to that policy area. And we're going to be collecting and monitoring the online open house over the next few weeks.
Great. Malachi, thank you so much. That was really very helpful. That was a lot of information. And, you know, I think it's always interesting when you get a chance to see how your neighbors think about the issues that you care about. That was your first time to see the survey results, but those will be, you know, this whole presentation and everything else will be posted online with a lot more opportunity for you to dig into the details and either make comments or ask questions. But this is a point where we have three different ways when you can sort of chime in on your thoughts or questions about some of the stuff that Malachi just presented. We've loaded up another Mentimeter poll, which you can take at your leisure. And the main thing we want to know is, you probably heard a lot that might sound familiar. Some of it may surprise you, but is there anything missing from what you heard? Anything that really wasn't addressed that should be? In addition, some of you have already started to use the chat to either ask a question or make a comment. We encourage you to do that because that's what online stuff is good at, getting a lot of people's input at once. And finally, we can take a few questions. We don't want to keep you here all night because we have other things to do on the agenda, but I see Mike Takahashi already has his hand up. So Mike, I'd like you to just go ahead and ask your question or make your comment.
Yeah, nowhere have you mentioned, you know, like, for example, just in my neighborhood alone, we have several houses that are not vacation rentals, just long-term rentals, but they are split up into like 4 or sometimes even 5 units. And this significantly impacts the traffic, the cars, the just the basic infrastructure, you know, the cesspools having to be pumped constantly. Is there any kind of plan or, you know, in the long-term sustainable community plan to deal with such, I mean, to me, it borders on abuse. And I think it does provide rentals. Whether they're affordable or not is another matter of question. But, you know, I think that's something that needs to be addressed in the long-term plan.
So basically over occupancy of
Correct.
existing housing?
Exactly.
Okay. Thanks. Good point. Okay. Does anybody else have anything that they wanted to either ask or comment on? We can also monitor the chat. Charlene. You're on mute though, Charlene.
Yeah, hi there. I really felt that the 2011 plan was pretty darn good, you know, and I think this one is going to probably follow along very much similar lines in terms of concerns. My question is, once again, how does this plan help with enforcement? Because we have wonderful zoning rules, and I just don't understand how we can, because enforcement is everything, right? I was just wondering how this would possibly play into that.
Yeah, that's one of the topics we've heard a lot in interviews. And it's one of the persistent, probably concerns in any area because it's so often tough to do. But we are going to be looking at, are there viable ways to help enforcement? Some of those may be suggestions or policies for changes in, you know, maybe the role that the city plays in permitting stuff. It has to do with what is recommended, but like, for example, I know the CPR issue, the condominium property regime issue, has been brought up by a lot of people. And part of the dilemma with enforcement is right now the counties, as I understand it, can comment on the appropriateness of the application if it's on ag land, but they don't provide, they're not allowed to provide a letter of certification. However, there is a bill in the legislature that would actually require anybody doing a CPR to get the county's certification that this does, comport with an agricultural use. So that's the kind of thing that can help enforcement. But we're going to be talking about this a lot more with CPAC and the city as to, are there other ways that can be improved?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, does anybody else, oh, Ed.
Hi, good evening. I think one of the, I brought it up at one of the previous meetings is it really comes down to Haleiwa and Wailua in terms of where a high percentage of people would like to see the infilling of Haleiwa rather than growth outside of Haleiwa town, which I believe everybody is in agreement with. The only problem that is under the existing zoning regulations, it doesn't really allow for various types of infill, such as residential lands and or even commercial for that matter, and also parking too. One of the things that I believe we had on the Haleiwa Town Plan, which was done about 30 years ago, and I think it mirrors a bit into the previous sustainable plan, is looking at the city looking at doing a country town zoning, similar to what you see on Maui. I think it's in Hana and a couple other towns there too, to where you can have a mixed use. It's low impact. You can have agricultural land on agriculture use on residential on agriculture. You can have parking on agriculture, and it's limited to what is on your maps. Especially in between Cam Highway and the bypass road, in that strip to actually have infill, because right now DPP in the city leaves it up to the individual landowner to do the rezoning for the use that the community pretty much wants in those area. And for the individual landowner to do that rezoning, the costs are so high that it actually, there's no such thing as an affordable outcome to it. And in addition, if somebody's going to go through that expense to do an individual, they're going to try to do it outside of the growth areas where they can get a higher return on their dollar. So it puts more pressure for development outside of the growth areas, and it raises costs for any kind of development inside the growth areas. And, I think it really needs to be looked at in terms of Haleiwa with a country town zoning.
Good point. Very good. Okay, great. All right. Well, we were mindful that we have other things on the agenda, and we want to get we want to be able to wrap up. But we're also mindful that some of you might want to just take a quick 5-minute bio break. When you do these meetings, that doesn't mean that people's needs shut down. So why don't we go ahead and just take a 5-minute break from this. We're going to leave the screen up. You're going to be able to see the Mentimeter results coming in for anybody who wants to continue voting on it. And then we'll pick back up again at 6:45. Ambling back to your computer. We're going to get started in about a minute. I see the chat is active with a lot of questions on the tourism. And if you haven't looked at that, Melissa's referring to a white paper on tourism, a very comprehensive one that was done just for this effort. And that's going to be posted fairly shortly on the website. So I encourage you to take a look at that when it's up. Okay, now we're going to pivot to a look at the 2011 plan vision. and where we go from here. But before we do, let's just take stock again of this Mentimeter poll that we asked basically, was there anything missing from what you heard? You see, traffic is the big issue. We did talk about traffic. We didn't talk about it enough, I guess. But you know, it's clear that's the massive issue. And I think probably the most interesting thing is you probably have had a year when traffic is relatively lower than it has been in the past. So everybody's aware of what will happen if and when the level of traffic returns to what you've been more used to in previous years. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to Jared Chang, who is going to bring us through discussion on the vision for the plan. Jared?
Okay, thanks, Keith. Hello, everybody. My name is Jared Chang. I'm a planner at SSFM. Can we get to my cover slide? You can actually go to the next one, actually. So let's talk about the future. Okay, next slide. All right, what is a vision statement? A vision statement is not intended to solve today's problems, but instead it's a description of a desired future state. And for this plan update, it's the year 2045. So the vision serves as a guidepost for the goals, policies, actions, and for measuring progress on the plan. All of the actions that we cover in the vision will have to be tested. All the actions covered in the plan have to be tested against the vision for consistency towards that desired future state. So our update of this plan with your input will take a look at the current vision statement and the vision elements and determine, one, if it's still relevant, and two, if it needs to be updated to match what the North Shore community envisions the 2045 year would look like. So the 2011 North Shore Sustainable Communities Plan had a vision statement and vision elements. That's basically chapter 2 in the plan that's available on the virtual open house. You can use your phone camera or any QR code scanner and scan that code in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, and it'll take you directly to the vision statement and the vision elements. So chapter 2 in the 2011 plan. So the big question is, what does success look like in 2045? Next slide. Okay, so here's a list of basically the 10 vision elements from the plan. These are the 10 key elements that contributed to the development of the vision statement. Full descriptions of each element are available on the open house website. Each one of it is pretty lengthy and pretty well written. So I would agree with Charlene that the plan, the 2011 plan, is very good. The vision statement in that plan similarly is very good. And those vision statement elements essentially started in 2000. They were modified a little bit in 2011, and we're going to do the same for for this plan, for looking at 2045. So in the next set of slides, I'm going to briefly talk a little bit about each one of these 10 vision statement elements. So at this time, I'm going to refer everyone back to the Mentimeter polling app and ask that as I'm going through this presentation, you go ahead and respond to the next 2 questions on vision elements. And basically what we're asking for here is your thoughts on each element and to the level which you agree that that is still relevant. You strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. One thing to note is that we can only fit 5 of them at a time on a question in Mentimeter. So to get to you have to get through the first 5 before you get to the next 5. But I think if you want to change your response you can always go back. Okay, let's get started. All right. Vision element number 1, maintain the community growth boundary to protect agricultural, open space, and natural resources. So in this element, the community growth boundary, as it was intended when established, is an effective tool to guide development to certain areas and to protect others from development. So the boundary contains communities to the rural land use designation in the general plan, and it will preserve areas outside of the boundary for ag, open space, scenic resources, natural resources, or preservation. Okay, vision element 2, promote a diversified agricultural industry. The agricultural industry remains healthy and a major economic contributor to the North Shore. Supporting and sustaining this industry ensures the long-term protection of North Shore ag lands and open spaces. And in addition to the community growth boundary as a tool, the plan also supports economic incentives for the agriculture industry and visitor-based activities that are accessory to the ag industry. Vision element 3, enhance the region's recreational and educational potential. So the North Shore's Malka and Mackay recreational resources are preserved and enhanced with better community access and expanded facilities to meet island-wide demands on these resources. But while improvements are made to meet demands, these resources are also protected from overuse. I think that's the wrong slide. That's the next one probably. So I wonder if we're missing a slide here. Sorry. Okay, so resources are protected from overuse, but planned for the current demands, today's demands, and going forward. This one also talks about access improvements, which include better systems of pedestrian paths and bikeways to link parks, schools, and town centers. All right, I'm on vision element number 4 now. That's promote Haleiwa and Wailua towns as country towns. Okay, sorry, I think we were missing a slide on this. This is vision element 4, promote Haleiwa and Wailua towns as country towns. Haleiwa and Wailua towns are the main commercial districts, and cores of each are designated as country towns. This maintains their rural small town character and encourages compact town development. The Wailua Town Master Plan and the Haleiwa Special District Design Guidelines remain in effect. Vision element 5, support Wailua as a North Shore's industrial center. So the Wailua Mill site has been reinforced and possibly expanded to the Mackay as the regional industrial center for uses that support the agricultural and general industrial sectors. This has encouraged more commercial growth and enhanced the physical connection between the mill site and Wailua's town core. Okay, vision element 6, direct new housing to areas contiguous to Haleiwa and Wailua towns and use rural design guidelines for rural residential development. So in this vision, new residential development is located within Haleiwa and Wailua towns with additional infill on or next to existing lots in previously developed areas. In Wailua, new housing has replaced the former mill camp and expanded into the area Malka of the mill camp. In Haleiwa, infill residential expansion has occurred north of Pa'ala'a Road on lands outside of the floodplain. In addition, rural design guidelines and development standards have been developed and are in effect and ensure compatibility with the region's rural character. Vision element 7, provide adequate and appropriately sized public infrastructure, facilities, and services. In this scenario, public agencies and private developers have worked together to provide right-sized infrastructure, public facilities, and services. This would cover drainage, wastewater, roads and other transportation modes, parks, public facilities, communication facilities, electric, and water. Plans have to take into account the residents plus the large number of non-resident visitors, but also have to prevent negative impacts to water, scenic, recreational, open space, and other environmentally or community sensitive areas. Okay, vision element 8, preserve and protect cultural and historic resources. So there are significant plantation era and other historic features such as at Haleiwa Town, Waialua Town, the Waialua Mill, as well as Native Hawaiian cultural and archaeological sites. These are preserved and protected. This is critical to retaining the area's unique identity and country character, and also involves an educational awareness system to enhance the protection and appreciation for these resources. Vision element 9. Adapt the Ahupua'a concept as a framework for land use and natural resource management. Now, while the communities in the various Ahupua'a in this district, I think there's 18 of them, may be diverse, they all share a common desire to preserve the natural, cultural, and historic heritage of the region. The Ahupua'a concept is a holistic approach to land management that recognizes the connections between land-based and marine-based natural resources and the dependent relationships between ecological functions. Adapted to the context of today's community needs and technology, the Ahupua'a concept will help provide useful principles for guiding the use and management of the North Shore's resources and deters land-based activities which would contribute to their degradation. Last one, and one note, this last one was added in 2011. So vision element 10, integrate principles of sustainability into decision-making processes. Rural communities are likely to be more sensitive to change, and residents of rural communities tend to be more likely directly affected by the actions of others. So for the North Shore, this means ensuring that planned growth and development respects and adheres to the principles of sustainability. Sustainability principles will promote the long-term health of the land and community resources for both current and future generations of residents. Okay, that was pretty quick. I did want to get to the discussion quickly. So like I said earlier, you know, there's quite more that goes into each vision element that you can see on open house. But now we are going to look at the results from the vision elements polling. Okay, looks like we got about 23 people responded. There's still 54 people in the meeting. It's not too bad.
Yep. 45%.
Yeah. Let's see, pretty interesting. Yeah, when Malachi hovers the mouse over those, it tells you what those wavy colors in the back are. It's where all the votes were. So looks like it's pretty good information we're getting here. Input.
Good. Okay. I think we have 2 more Mentimeter questions before we break into the breakout groups. Why don't we actually proceed to those, Malachi? There we go. We've already answered them. Okay.
I noticed that you combine recreational and educational, and I suppose they could be combined, but mostly it's easier to think of them as not being combined. And I know that there's an effort to have, like 10 categories, but I really don't think marrying recreational and education together is a very good marriage.
Okay, good input. That's the actual literal vision element topic in the 2011 plan. So,
well, that's why I bring it up. We disputed that then, and I'm still disputing it. And they kind of just backed into a number where we only want 10, but it still isn't a very good marriage. Anyway, my point of view.
Got it.
Right.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay. And this is yet another word cloud as to what stands out to as most important. Ag is a little bit higher than traffic, but not by much.
Very good.
There actually wasn't a vision element directly related to traffic, was there, Jared?
Sorry, say that again, Keith.
There wasn't, in the 2011 plan, was there a vision element related to traffic?
Yeah, it had to do with I forget what number it was, but it was basically appropriately sizing infrastructure. So it
Okay.
had talked about traffic.
Okay.
Oh, not traffic. I mean roads and other modes.
Okay. Well, this is helpful. So what we want to do now, we're at, just past 7 o'clock, because we're doing really good on time, folks. This is great. We want to bring you back into another breakout group setting, but larger groups. And we're going to do this on the fly in just a sec. So you're going to be randomly put into some breakout groups. But basically, we want to ask you to, and one of us on the team is going to be in each breakout group so we can facilitate. But we want to ask you 2 questions. It's sort of parallel to some of the questions you got on Mentimeter. Which vision elements in the 2011 plan that you've heard are still important and relevant? The top ones. And is there anything missing? Anything that you haven't heard that should be a part of the vision? Because you have to think of the vision as the building block. This is the foundation for doing everything beyond that in terms of policy, guidelines, and whatnot. If it's not captured in the vision, then it really doesn't get captured in the other downstream sort of actions. So it's important to put things in that you can build upon. So let us know if there's not anything in there that needs to be. Here's a couple that are popping up right now: climate change that maybe needs to be introduced into there. So let's go ahead and split into these groups. We're going to take just 15 minutes. So we're going to go to about 7:15. And it'd be great if everybody chimes in and says at least one thing. We'd like to hear from you. Then after that, we'll come back into the whole group meeting again, have a quick debrief from what we heard, and then we're going to be wrapping up for the evening. So somebody want to push the magic button and push everybody into a room?
Hello there.
How you doing, Dave?
Hi there.
Hi, Melissa.
You gotta unmute. You gotta unmute.
Okay. I think this is our group. Oh, we got some CPAC, almost all CPAC members in here. Nice to see you guys. So I guess I'll be helping to facilitate this room, and let me just look at my cheat sheet here. Oh, I'm supposed to record this. Okay. I don't think I can do that because I've already got a recording going for the main meeting. But so I'm Melissa May. If you guys have missed my introduction, and I'm the project manager for this, and I'm just here to help facilitate this discussion and hear from you guys. So we have 15 minutes to discuss this, maybe a little less than that now that we just broke out. And at the end of this, does anyone want to volunteer to kind of report back just for a couple minutes when we rejoin the large group on what we discussed?
Sure, I can do that, Melissa.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Great. Okay, so we're discussing the vision and, tapping into where you want to be and what you want to see in the community in 25 years. So put your hats on for your hopes for the future. And, if all goes right, what will the community look like to you in 25 years? That's the place that we're thinking from. And so I guess let's start by throwing out some ideas and key parts of that vision that that help describe how you'd like to feel and see the community in 25 years.
I'll start.
Okay.
What the heck? I would like to see us take more advantage of the industries we have in place to diversify our economy, particularly agriculture. If we can solidify the supply chain, get a handle on land tenure, and create more successful farms that lead to increased food production and opportunities for other entrepreneurs to do things in food processing, value added production, that contributes to that industrial base that we're talking about in Wailua. But agriculture has a legacy on the North Shore, and it's been beaten up since cane and pineapple left. But that doesn't make us any less rural or, any less dependent on agriculture as part of our economy. I think there's a lot of opportunity for jobs and business creation in agriculture. We just need to bring some things together and make some significant investments in modern agriculture.
Thank you. Okay, so that's where you'd like to see us. Let's see, I need to assign somebody to a breakout room here. Here we go. I see a couple people I need to pick up. Okay. Anyone else want to share, like, what's a really important idea or feeling or outcome that you'd like to see?
I don't know, for myself, we hardly had any change up until about 10 years ago when everything just went open and everybody wanted to change Haleiwa and make it into something else. And like Kevin said, we need to concentrate on agriculture. This community was known as the breadbasket, you might say. And a comment from a traveler in the 1700s, I think, was that he was surprised how much agriculture was in this area when he came over the crest from Wahiwa, and he was, really, he liked it. And we need to preserve our ag lands, because sometime around 25 years ago, there might be something happen and we're not going to have ships and stuff coming from someplace else, and we're not going to be able to eat anything. You can't eat houses. And so we need to maintain our ag land and slow down the development of basically selling the North Shore to the tourists. Anyway, that's my thing. We got to preserve agriculture.
Thank you. How about Tehani?
I agree. I think with the sentiments that Uncle Leaf has shared, as well as Kevin, I think that it's really important for our community to diversify its economy. But I also think it's important that we don't throw Haleiwa under the bus for the rest of the North Shore. Because there was kind of this, in the meeting, there was kind of this tone of, we're going to just, and this has been on the North Shore about, particularly from residents who are not from Haleiwa, saying that we should just put everything in Haleiwa and the rest of the North Shore can still be country. And I don't necessarily think that's the answer. I think that creates a lot of division between the North Shore as a whole. And historically, most of the communities, like minority communities, socioeconomic, is in Haleiwa and Wailua. And I personally have an issue with that sentiment that was kind of being spread around and has been being spread around. I think that's important to kind of take into account. But yeah, agricultural lands, I think water quality, we're obviously having an issue with agricultural lands not having clear titles, which has kind of been something that's been evolving on the North Shore in recent years, or I guess been perpetuating, and it's been coming to light in recent years, as well as I think just climate change in general affecting the way our shorelines are looking. So lots of things.
Yes, there's lots of issues. Okay, let me see if I can, or let me ask you, if you had to project your feelings about Haleiwa's role into 25 years in the future, you know, into how you'd like it to see, how would you describe it? Kind of in the lines of, you know, what you don't want it to be, but you know, what would you like its role to be in the future?
I think Haleiwa should be a cultural and historical hub. I think that our town and our community, the North Shore community, has a lot of history, and we've been kind of, I don't want to say erased, but displaced, I think, by the more modern surfing industry and surfing agenda, I would say. So I think that, you know, Haleiwa has the potential to be a cultural community hub for the North Shore, as it was in traditional times. So like back in the day. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to the people who have their video on are going to get called on first. So let's hear from Mia.
I completely agree with what everyone has said. Like, I think that we need to become less reliant on shipments from the mainland, and we need to, so if something bad were to happen where those ships couldn't come in, we need to be able to last more than like a week. And I also think that we do need to preserve Haleiwa. I'm from around here and I go to school in Wailua, and it can't be forgotten in a way that, like, it is a place of a lot of culture and we need to appreciate it. And yeah, and also climate change is a big issue. Also in Sunset Beach, like erosion, I've seen, like, some of my friends live on the beach and I've seen their yards completely destroyed. And that's an issue that needs to be addressed and hopefully solved within this plan.
Thank you. Okay, Manu, would you like to share some thoughts?
I'm gonna unmute and hopefully there's no feedback.
So far, so good.
So you asked about how I would feel in 2024. So when you come and you from Wahiawa and you just crest the hill, there's that feeling of open space. Only the trees that border the coffee farms are kind of now in your way, your visual field. But it's that feeling that you're coming home and there's still open space in this community. So if I look at sustainable or diversified ag versus planned community development, I'm gonna go with the keeping diversified ag. Because I agree with Kevin and everybody else that spoke that we need to be more self-sustaining, but also maintain that sense of community. So at one point in time, the farmers were able to rely on the fishermen and vice versa, and everybody had something to contribute. So it's the interconnectedness of the people and the resources to keep this community thriving.
Oh, some beautiful sentiments. Thank you. Mary, would you like to share? We've just got a few minutes left, so I want to make sure we get to everybody.
Yes, I'm Mary Chan and I live in Haleiwa. And I really appreciate what the people before me have said, and I agree with so many of them. It's too bad this is not being recorded, so I hope that this information will get to the rest of the group that is so important to preserve maybe the land here, the agriculture, and to preserve more land just to be as it remains, to stress the Hawaiian culture and how important that is to the surroundings of Haleiwa. There's so many countries that preserve major portions of their country all the time just for the other generations. And like others people have said, Haleiwa town is just being very abused because I live right in Haleiwa, and it just is it has so much more to offer than it's being offered right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And Nepua, would you like to share?
Hi, I agree with everyone. I think in addition, I would like to see more
community-owned agriculture, like how people have been coming together to create co-ops so that it can be protected from large landowners. And it would also be nice to put a moratorium on non-local or non-Hawaii residents on purchasing housing. I would like to see still brown people in our community, because right now we can't afford our housing. And so because of that, they're selling, and then people who aren't from here are buying up all the properties.
Okay, so I guess let's see. So diversity and keeping the community for locals. I see somebody popped into our room. Andrea, is there anything you'd like to share? Okay, maybe we've just got a spectator, but is there anything that stands out that is missing? Did any of you hear like, okay, this is really just not covered by the current vision and needs to be? I think we've got about 1 minute left.
I'd like to add to what Napo had mentioned, and something that actually came up when Ariyoshi was governor, and I'd like to see it mandated. You had to live here for more than 5 or 10 years before you can purchase property. That would kind of preserve our lifestyle.
So you said that was actually proposed by a previous governor?
Yes, George Ariyoshi was working on it.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I didn't know there was a policy precedent for that. We can look into that.
I don't know how far it got, but he was working on it. That's all I know.
All right, we're going to be put back in the main room in 20 seconds. And I really appreciate it. Okay, thanks, Kevin, for, I've been taking notes too, so don't worry. Your thoughts have been recorded by both Kevin and myself, and we'll put them into the meeting record. So see you all back in the main group.
I'm going to record this just so we can share it. Okay, so as Keith mentioned, what we're trying to do is just kind of have a chance to talk story a little bit more about what was covered in terms of the vision elements from the last plan. So just want to hear from you, what ideas in the vision from the last plan really stand out to you as most important to bring with us towards this new vision or towards updating this vision? And then what, if there are any new elements that weren't considered in the last plan that should be included? So maybe if we can go around the room and if you can touch on those 2 points, that would be great. Anyone want to volunteer to go first?
Malachi, you don't have a list of those vision points that you
I'll
could
pull
share?
it up. I can pull it. I can share.
It's hard to remember all of them exactly.
The vision. Let me see. You're lucky you're with me because I actually have the presentation.
Unless everyone remembers them better than I do.
Let's let me share my screen again and see if I can go back. Okay.
Well, if it's too much trouble, then
well, let me end my show. I'll just do it like this.
Malachi, as you're pulling that up,
sure.
You know, the vision statement element number 7, providing adequate and appropriate sized public infrastructure facilities and services, seems to be, I mean, like the foundational thing that will drive a lot of these and solve a lot of these issues and so forth with regards to agriculture and how we manage our tourism, traffic, and providing, you know, adequate walkability kind of environment. I mean, example is, I mean, important agricultural lands. While we've got a lot of agricultural lands, without the adequate infrastructure where you can provide water so that you can actually farm on the land. So, the water's a significant constraint right now with a lot of our Kamehameha school lands. So, adequate infrastructure seems to be top of mind, and that's still really a very important element, I believe, for us. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Calvin. Let's see. Oh, Mike, we have a new person joining us too. Great. Mike, are you there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, no problem. So we're basically asking a couple questions here. What ideas from the vision stand out as most important? And then if there's anything new that, any new vision elements that you'd like to see included in this update. So we're going around the room now. And since you're talking, I'll let you go. I'll let you speak if you feel comfortable on those points.
Yeah, I think a lot of it resonates with me. I think for sure the concept of traffic is always is such a huge topic, and I think that being for sure a top priority because it affects the overall enjoyment of the area, both to visit and live in. And then the other thing that I think, to chime in to the speaker that just spoke on agriculture, I think it's interesting that if we're thinking 2045 and understanding what agriculture looks like, it's really hard to have a vision when you're thinking back to the sugar plantations and stuff, and then trying to envision what it should look like. And I don't know, maybe there's a model out there in other countries that have done it well that could be incorporated on what we want ag to look like. And that's all I have.
It's a really interesting, it's a good point in terms of agriculture. It's kind of hard to know what technology will be existing then, which I think one thing we've heard in some of the conversations we've had is that's one of the reasons to hold on to agriculture land, even if it's not in production, because or it's not productive now, it could still be. Is it Shay? Shay, do you want to go next?
This is actually the first time this meeting that I'm seeing all of these vision elements
to
the game. But obviously traffic is an issue, but for me, it's not the main issue. I am more on the preservation of cultural historic resources in INA side, along with the preservation of agricultural land, because I feel like we've seen time and time again, not necessarily on the North Shore, but throughout the state, of these land parcels being sold and then developed. So I like where that's going about how keep the lands how they are. As far as we were talking about water clarity and the incentives of the water catchment system, I think that could be really cool. And I think another incentive that we should really be trying to push, I'm not sure how anyone could do that though, is to encourage the planting of native trees that are natural aquifers. So they'll help filter the water, help keep everything clean naturally, like the Ahupua'a systems of old did. And if we could somehow implement that into a modern North Shore, I just couldn't be happier.
Great. Those are great ideas. Thanks for sharing. Auntie Kathy, do you want to go next? We have about 5 minutes left in this group. So
okay, I'll talk fast.
No rush, no rush.
I actually am in agreement with Shay regarding point number 8, which is preserve and protect cultural and historic resources. And I'm mainly coming from that because I was part of the UH Manoa North Shore ethnographic field school oral history project. And I'm continuing to work with the community. So I am not a resident of Wailua, but I am a community ally. And I feel that it's really important in looking towards the future, like Shay had mentioned, keeping the lands intact unless there's a really specific purpose that will take into consideration the preservation of that land and proper usage of it. going back to that principles is very important in that respect, because you are utilizing what is indigenous to Hawaii and not bringing in other things unless there's really a lot of thought put into that. And also, I think as far as the preservation part of it and tourism goes along with that, is making sure that the sites that are cultural sites need to be protected, even though they are a draw for tourism. The respect and the preservation of those areas are really important, I think. So I think that is a really important point that needs to be emphasized. So thank you.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, that might be a topic area to be expanded on, I think, in this plan. It's a pretty short part of the vision. It's kind of broad, but it sounds like those are some kind of concrete ideas. That's great. Okay, we have 4 minutes I just got from Melissa. So Zoe, do you have anything to share?
Yeah, so I'm a student at Wailua High School. So I think that something I'm like really interested in is like enhancing the educational potential of students. So hopefully in the future we could see like more opportunities for students to like be a part of the community and do stuff like what I'm doing, what I got the opportunity to do, like be a part of these committees and give our input on how we want our community to change. And so I just think stuff like that would be really cool to see in the future. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we're super excited to have you as part of our, Zoe's one of our students on our advisory committee. So she's really excited to have that. It's not typical in these community plans. So it's awesome. Great. So let's see. Things I've heard as important. We just to kind of quickly recap before we go back is finding the infrastructure issue. Adequate infrastructure kind of is a driver for a lot of these issues, especially water, and that relates to agriculture. So kind of, I guess, figuring out what is adequate infrastructure. And I think something we heard, just to add on to that, I think is, not just for the residential population, but there is visitors, tourists, and also local visitors who use, that's why there's traffic in a lot of ways. And traffic is obviously a big issue.
Can I jump in on that? This is Franz. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think it's clear, or sorry, it's important to make the distinction between appropriate size, because, and you just touched on it. I don't think we're saying appropriate size means make it larger for, large enough to handle all the people who are coming, but to make it appropriate size in a manageable way, whether it's adequate size piping and whatnot and catchment for water. But for traffic, it's not like building bigger roads to ease the traffic, but maybe managing it better and the improvements that go along with that. Is that what I'm hearing from everyone on that?
Yeah, that aligns with what I heard too, France. And I think also I like how Calvin said that it's a driver for other issues. Like when you talk about it that way, the other issues that come up, right, is like walkability and kind of their historic town characteristics, and enhancing those aspects, will also help to define what appropriate size means for the community. So thinking about how these different things interact with one another.
Well, yeah, and everyone's points were really good. I just want to make sure they're appropriate. And I think that's it. I guess it's the context of what we're talking about, where appropriate is sufficient. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
Great. Yep. And then we heard about agriculture as important. And I like Mike's point about, hard to think about a vision for the future if we have this plantation model in our head. So thinking kind of outside the box towards new models, kind of thinking about 2045 and what that time will actually be like. And then preservation of natural resources and historic and cultural resources, and keeping them preserved and intact is really important. And having a proper plan to preserve and respect those sites is an important thing to keep in the plan and to maybe enhance. And then enhancing educational opportunities. We heard Uncle Bob talk about how he didn't like how that was lumped in with other things in there. So we heard from you, Zoe, that enhancing educational potential of students and opportunities to be a part of the community is something that you want to see. And so those are kind of the main points I had.
It's not like Waikiki. It's really country, and you want to keep it country, right? You don't, in order to not to keep it country and to welcome tourism there, you need more space, because just the town, it's just a short town, but with that short town that you have there, it's a lot of people going through that.
Right.
You know, so infrastructure is a big consideration. Traffic, you know, that type of thing. So how we're gonna do it with the amount of space that is there, that is already built, and future planning, granted, that's the future ones that is coming, that you could place, but it's what's there now. I think Cassie is what you're more concerned on too, yeah, with tourism.
Mm-hmm. The only other thing, and I don't think that this question is the right place for this answer, but maybe you can tell me if there's going to be an opportunity later in the session. We haven't been talking about like taxes and fees at all. We've been talking about problems, but one of the primary problems that I see is that the taxes are not proportionately going to the North Shore from the city and county, considering the amount of tourism we have. And the tourists who are coming to the North Shore aren't spending their dollars in the same way that they do in Waikiki. Like, it's not shopping. When you come to the North Shore, you go to a hike and you go to the beach, and yeah, you maybe stop at a shop, but like, how do you ensure that we get a representative amount of the taxes, or do we need to impose additional fees to ensure that the North Shore gets the money it needs for the infrastructure, considering the influx of tourists and visitors that we get, particularly now in a post-COVID environment? So maybe there's another time to say that, but I think that's one of the most critical pieces of all of this that has not been addressed yet.
Could I add something to that? I work at, thank you. I work at the University of Hawaii, and have been talking to North Shore stakeholders about, we're working on an erosion plan, similar to what's happening here tonight with kind of the vision for the North Shore. We're planning some similar conversations with respect to beach erosion. And one of the things that has come up is what is the value of the beach? And there are methods and models that you can use to value natural resources. Of course, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty with that because it's a natural resource, but some of you may have heard of an organization at UH called UHERO, or the University of Hawaii Economic Research Organization. And they're the ones that are providing data to DBED and the state, in addition to others, on, you know, what does the economy look like, how, you know, visitor arrivals, what's that going to do to our tax base? And I think there is an opportunity to, what Cassie's talking about is, what does the North Shore generate, or, you know, as far as a tax revenue base, how many visitors are coming to the North Shore? That came up earlier. Those are really important questions, because you can start to put a number to that. And if the elected officials for the district feel that that's something that's worthy of drawing attention to, maybe we start to see a better balanced appropriation of tax money towards roads and parks and bathrooms and all that great stuff, right? So I agree. I think there's an opportunity. I also think, whether it's the university or whoever does that type of research, economic studies of what the North Shore generates would be really helpful for adding weight to that question of, you know, how do we appropriate some of that infrastructure? So I just wanted to mention that there's ongoing conversations as we speak.
Thanks for sharing that, Dolan.
Sure.
Raquel, do you have you want to chime in, and do you have any ideas in the vision of what stands out to you as most important, or is there any new vision elements that you think we should consider for the plan?
Sure, thank you. Hi, Casey. I actually, Casey makes great points. Although I'm going to turn it in a little bit different direction, yeah? I believe that COVID has taken us to another mindset. Given post-COVID, I think we've realized we've become too reliant on tourism. The North Shore is extremely reliant on it. And that's a dangerous situation to be in, obviously. And it's not just the North Shore, right? It's statewide. We've seen the effects. I mean, we're looking at a 170-year bakery go down because of it, right? So I feel tourism pretty much has done a terrible job at growing with their own industry, right? So agriculture, in my opinion, is huge. We cannot sustain ourselves if we don't have that. And that should be a massive priority. Growing up here, born and raised, agriculture was our base, and it was very, very lucrative. And I think we've become so invested and so reliant on tourism, we've forgotten how to nurture and take care of that agricultural industry that could absolutely keep us going, whether there's a pandemic or not.
Right. It's a really good point, Raquel, and that's noted. Yeah, so I see that also as that tourism just really has a really big impact in the area. Looks like we're gonna close in 2 seconds, so I'll see you in the big.
Talk to me about
All right. So I think we're all back out of our small groups, and we're going to ask each person who volunteered to report back to really succinctly, maybe a minute, give just the highlights of what you heard from the others in the group. I'm going to call on Antje Miller first, because I know she was the reporter for the group I was in. So Antje, if you are ready, why don't you distill the wisdom that we talked about?
As ready as I'll be. So Charlene kicked it off by saying she feels like the plan's very well done, and I think a lot of us will agree with that. But she feels many things have gone in the opposite direction, like the too many tourists and vacation rentals. So we need to look at that. Melissa and Kayla brought up that a lot of the things in the plan that are issues now are not enforceable, and we need more enforcement. Kayla specifically brought up that she wants tourists to be educated and to use the Ahupua'a system to do that, so that they understand the cultural background and can hopefully be better when they're tourists here. Bob said there's not a whole lot in there about crime prevention. And Kayla also brought this up. She said, we need a police substation here. And Bob also brought up the issue that he thinks that education and recreation should be separated. And recreation is a very big aspect of our economy, but with recreation you can overuse the resources that we have, so we need to look at that. And lack of parking in Haleiwa town, he brought that up. My husband brought up that we need local control, and we're often overlooked by the powers that be in Honolulu as a rural community, just like all the rural communities are. So he wants local control. Well, we'll see. Okay. Let's see, I think the other thing was social services. We've lost most of our social services that we've had out here traditionally. like a hospital. We're not going to get a hospital, but we had a hospital clinic, stores that catered to the residents, and senior programs, satellite city hall, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's it.
Great, thanks, Antje. Let's go next to
Rise.
let's go to Matt's group. Matt, who is your recorder? And let's get that out.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, we have Casey here who is going to share some of the good input that we got in our group. Go ahead, Casey.
Aloha, Kako. We talked primarily about the fact that post-COVID, COVID isn't really just a very temporary thing. It signifies a shift in mindset and mentality. And for many people, a way of life moving forward, which does a couple things. One, it brings more people to the North Shore, both people staying home because they can do their job remotely, transient visitors to the North Shore who have remote tech jobs, visitors to the North Shore increasing because they don't want to be in crowded Waikiki. They want to be socially distanced on the beaches. And how does that impact? Well, there's definitely recognition that the vision elements of this 2011 plan were very good. They might not have accounted for this kind of post-COVID life that we are going to be living in moving forward. And there are a couple pieces that come out of that. One, how do you create the infrastructure necessary to support quality of life for the residents, given the influx of visitors who want to have more kind of social distance? Two, how do you support the diversified economy so that technology positions the remote workers that you have? And then three, how do you continue to support agriculture? Because another thing that COVID has really made painfully clear is that our economy, particularly on the North Shore, is over-reliant on tourism. So how do we really support our agriculture, our farmers, to make that piece of the economy pie a little bit bigger, and also to promote food security? That's it.
Okay, so I think we're up with Abby's group now.
Great, thanks, Keith. We had a really wonderful conversation, which Carol will be reporting back on.
Carol, we can't hear you.
Okay, there you go. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Sorry about that. So our group agreed that the ideas in the previous sustainable plan were all pertinent and valid and mattered to today. One of the ones was ag lands, and that they're used for diversified agriculture, and that should be happening more and then being very important. Another issue was that tourism is creeping into all aspects of life on the North Shore. Cultural considerations about the ahupua'a, and how it really needs to be used as a guiding process and not just be talked about, and that it's really, really important that we actually use that concept and not just say not just recognize what an ahupua'a is, but actually practice it. That another thing was brought up was that in the current sustainable plan, I believe that there's none or very little mention of wildlife or native plants in there, and that there's lots of wildlife and native plants on the North Shore that are really important and should be protected. And so that should be something under natural resources. A concept that kind of sort of rung was residents first over tourist. And then with that said, recognizing that a lot of our tourists are actually residents from other parts of the island, and that the North Shore is the backyard for a lot of people on this island that come out to enjoy our beaches. So the impact is also local people. We see that on the weekends more. Another one was about home businesses kind of expanding too much, and people doing things that are impacting their neighbors perhaps with their home businesses. Another one was the impact of the U.S. military's use on the North Shore, and an example was brought up of the devilweed that was introduced up by the motocross track, for example, and some of their impacts. And so how is that affecting the North Shore? That's, I don't believe, mentioned in the plan right now. And let's see. And then the other one was about active transportation. So other, besides just cars, transportation models like biking and walking, perhaps carpooling, to be considered.
Okay.
And I believe that was mostly what we discussed.
All right, that's pretty comprehensive. Let's go to Jared's group. Jared?
Hey, I am reporting for our group because I offered and they accepted. So let's see, I have about 6 points that I captured in my notes. First one, consideration of the community growth boundary in concert with climate change impacts like sea level rise and managed retreat. So making sure that those are planned in concert together. Two, kind of related to traffic, but we need better connected communities for bikes and alternate modes of transportation and basically connections between communities. So people are not so dependent on their cars just to travel within places in the North Shore. Yeah, okay. Number three, heard this a few times already. We need a better understanding of the Ahupua'a concept and its education and how to implement that in this plan. Number four, implementation of resiliency hubs. So this is like incubators, a resource for the community, like the Key Project in Kahalu. This will provide more social enterprise hubs that they open up opportunities for the next generation. Yeah, okay, I think that was 4. 5. The balance between keeping the country and infrastructure. So, you know, having better connections like sidewalks and bike paths, but also in a rural context. So making sure that we address that. And the last one, number 6, North Shore deserves better broadband.
Good point, especially these days.
That was it. Oh, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, terrific. Let's go to Malachi's group.
Okay, we had Franz from the Department of Planning and Permitting who was going to report back from us, but he might be having technical difficulties. So if we can't hear him, then I'll jump in. Franz?
Okay. I think you better jump.
I'll jump in. Okay, sure. So our group had a really great conversation. We started our conversation talking about what it means to have appropriately sized infrastructure and kind of the effects that has on the other aspects of the vision, the other systems in the area, I mean, in the region. So looking at it as kind of a driver for a lot of these issues, understanding what that means in the context of the North Shore, you know, whether we're talking about appropriate water infrastructure to meet the agricultural needs, appropriate road infrastructure, not just make the roads wider, but how can we define that to meet the actual vision and the other elements too, and support the other elements in the vision as well. So in that conversation, we did talk about traffic as a priority to continue focusing on in this plan. And we also talked about agriculture. I thought an interesting point brought up by Mike was thinking about a vision for agriculture in 2045 really challenges us because we don't know what technology or what agriculture will look like then. And it's kind of a challenge for us to kind of remove ourselves from the plantation model as like the idealized version of agriculture and think about really what will agriculture be and what will the opportunities be in 2045. We also talked about preservation of natural resources as an important thing to maybe emphasize a bit more and keeping in mind protecting cultural resources, including mo'olelo and oral histories of the place. And making sure that these sites are protected, even if they're tourist attractions, making sure that there are plans in place where people understand protocol and respect to enhance preservation. And we also heard from Zoe, who's a Waialua high school student. She's on our CPAC, and she would like to see more emphasis on enhancing educational opportunities for students in the plan. To be a part of the community, to share their input and to share their vision on planning processes like this, but also on other projects that are tied to the community plan. So those are kind of the main points we touched on.
Terrific. And we'll go to Melissa last, especially that's a good segue because of the interest in the students.
I'm going to hand it over to Kevin. He's got a much better voice than I do.
Thanks, Melissa. We had a really good group, and I really want to start off with what Mary Chun said. She said, we have to continue to think about this being a forward-looking plan, and that this is all about future generations, not us. And so, in framing that, one of the pervasive things in our discussion was we have to get a handle on ag lands being preserved and used for agriculture. It's so important. And in that context, we can't expect Haleiwa and Wailua to absorb all of the growth and all of the industry for the whole region and let everywhere else just be, country. And back in the day, people depended on each other, created that sense of community. The fishermen helped the farmers and things like that. And so we don't want to lose that sense of community in how we move forward on those kinds of things.
Is this Larissa?
Now, that said,
Carol in North Shore.
Carol, can you go on mute, please?
Yeah.
Thanks. That said, Haleiwa and Wailua both have, a lot of historical and cultural value in the region too. We need to keep an eye on that and keep that sense of community. Leif pointed out that, this region was the breadbasket of Hawaii at one time. And the opportunity is really to create more ag and ag-related businesses and both promote agriculture, but promote, food processing, value-added kinds of things. And it was suggested by Napua about using co-ops to purchase land and keep land for local farmers, kinds of things. So we're exploring different ideas about how to do that. In the end, how do you create jobs and revitalize Wailua and really strive for self-sufficiency? I mean, that was what Mia brought up. She's a student and she's got to deal with beach erosion and the future of things. So the self-sufficiency and the, forward-looking climate change things were also on people's minds.
Terrific. Well, this is really good. And, I really want to give a big shout out to the students who were involved in this. I see a few faces already. And it's so important when you're doing a plan that extends out 25 years that we get your perspectives because, you're not going to be as old as me then, but you're going to be older. And this stuff is going to be your adult reality. So it's really important, I think, that we get that kind of viewpoint in there. We're near the end, which is great. And I only got a few more things to say before wrap up, but I really got to thank you all for hanging in there. I almost feel like we want to give everybody a pin for anybody who sticks through a meeting like this for the entire duration, because it shows conviction and stamina. Let's just talk about the next steps of what we're going to be doing and how you can stay informed and stay participatory. So next slide, please. We mentioned this online open house platform, which has been in the chat as well. And so this is where you can see the content that we presented tonight, but other things in the future as well. That whole site is going to continue to be populated with a lot of key information. One of the things that will be going up there is a tourism white paper that was commissioned specifically for this planning effort. I think you're going to find that very interesting and very informative. But it's also a chance for you to keep adding your comments all the way through. And, we want to push this out into the community as much as possible to broaden the base. We are going to have another community workshop in summer. It hasn't been scheduled yet, but probably June or July. And that's going to be a fascinating one because it's going to deal with futures. We're going to be looking deep into the future, but we're going to be hearing from some people who have a pretty good perspective on what we might be able to anticipate. And it's probably going to be a range of different things, options or scenarios. But it's important to get a sense of what really do we mean when we talk about sea level rise in your area? Or another possible topic is We've already seen the rise of the digital nomad, and that has been accelerated through the COVID pandemic. Well, if that is the reality going forward, what does that mean for a place like the North Shore? How might that play out? You're seeing a little bit now in your own community with new entrants to the community and the way the housing markets work when you have a totally mobile workforce. But these are the kinds of things that I think will be really important to cover in that type of futures workshop. Next slide, please. So we encourage you to just visit that website. You can also follow on Facebook, or you can just email us your comments or questions as well. Next slide, I think that's pretty much about it. Other points of contact. If you want to talk to anybody at DPP, Raymond Young is project manager for this. I think a lot of you probably know him already. But if you want to dialogue with him, that's his contact information. Melissa May is our project manager for this project, and she's always very accessible. So encourage you to also email or give her a ring as well. Next slide. And I think that wraps it up at this point. We're only 8 minutes over schedule, so I don't feel entirely guilty. But I really want to thank you all again for spending a couple of hours with us. We hope you got a lot out of it. We know that as a planning team, we did. We heard a lot, and we really appreciate it. So on that note, mahalo and good night.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Aloha, everyone.
Aloha.
Aloha, everyone.
Hello. Thank you.
Great job, team.
Stay safe.